Welcome to part 47. In the previous video and its addendum, I showed how I believe clues were left in Shakespeare's sonnets that tell us Henry Wriothesley, the 3rd Earl of Southampton, was the son of Edward de Vere, the author of the sonnets. Following the posting of the video, I discovered more that, if I've interpreted everything correctly, adds some weight not only to Wriothesley being Oxford's son, but also further proof of the existence of the Rosy Cross prior to the date people claim they were founded. The way John Dee encodes this is really something, so let's get to it. In his video, Where is Shakespeare Really Buried?, Alexander Waugh explains how T or tau is a cross representing Jesus. T is the 19th letter of the Latin alphabet, and there are 19 T's printed in the Sonnets Dedication. When the sonnets are written into a 19-grid pattern, messages can be found in the shapes of pictures or symbols called rebuses. I call them rebuses. I also think theologian should be pronounced theologian, and I call Ouroboros or Ouroboros because it sounds metal. Alright, now in part 1 of his video, Waugh also explains how Alan Green found a hidden geometry on the cover of the sonnets. This led to the discovery of a Cairo symbol and the message Shakespeare's Sonnets by God and de Vere. He also found that the byline is an anagram for by God and Oxford 17 Earl. Sometime later, I discovered there's actually 3 messages encoded in the cover. By God, Vere, and Rosy Cross is found once with the Cairo symbol and twice in the byline. I explained this in video 40. With the Cairo symbol on the cover and the rebuses he found in the dedication grid, Waugh discovered that Edward de Vere is buried at South Cross Aisle, St. Peter's at the Westminster, beneath the Shakespeare Memorial. Waugh also points out the letter D in the middle of the Westminster rebus, where the courtyard is. This is John Dee signing his work. In part 3 of the video, Waugh explains who discovered the grid as well as the messages they found hidden within the dedication that tells us E. Vere or Edward Vere is the 4th T. Edward de Vere is the 17th Earl of Oxford, so he's 1740. There's a lot that goes into this number, so please see Waugh's videos, Thomas Edwards New and The Divinity of Man to learn more. Okay, now back to the grid. One of the rules is that the rebuses have to be in the shape of either an I for Iesus, Jesus, or a cross. God is a trinity, and Waugh shows 3 rebuses in the shape of letter I's representing Iesus. The remaining messages are in the shapes of crosses. Now it's here that I have to point out a mistake I made in the last video. I thought I'd found a rebus in the shape of a mason square spelling oro, Spanish for gold, and OT, symbolizing a rose cross. The problem is, when I made the grid, I mistakenly typed the letter O when it was supposed to be an E. I thought because we find mason squares in other Shakespeare works, this was another one, but I should have realized that it wasn't a valid rebus because it's not in the shape of a cross. There are specific rules to the grid, and they have to be followed for the messages to be valid. It didn't affect anything else I'd found, and the grid was corrected, and it's a good thing because an E beginning column 17 will be important later. Okay, now in addition to where Edward de Vere is buried, Waugh also shows the rebuses mention a paternity lie in Vere's line, and that he is without male issue, meaning he died without a legitimate male heir. In the last video, I showed 2 rebuses I found that I believe tell us what that lie is. The rebus in column 12 is in the shape of scales, the astrological sign of Libra. According to history, Henry Wriothesley was born October 6th under the sign of Libra. The words in the rebus read, ensuing son Henry 4T. 4T refers to Oxford. This is why it's in column 12. In the last video, I explained how I believe 12 is a cipher for 4T. I discovered that the gematria value of 4-letter T's is equivalent to the values of the letters spelling Oxford. So there's a correspondence between 12, a cipher for 4T, and Oxford. Now in the bowls of the scales, read right to left, are letters spelling Rosalie. Read left to right, it's Tela Rose. In Spanish, tela means cloth. Tela Rose translates to rose cloth. Rosecloth refers to the Tudor royal garment or mantle. The royal garment is worn by kings and queens, symbolizing their authority. Wriothesley wears the Tudor mantle because when we look before and after the words ensuing son, there are the letters E-O and E-R. E-O are initials for Edward Oxford or Earl of Oxford, and E-R are initials for Elizabeth Regina, Latin for Queen Elizabeth. They're on opposite ends of the ensuing son to reflect being the father and mother. The other rebus I showed in the video is in column 13. It's in the shape of a cross of Lorraine, also called a cross of Anjou, and is comprised of the letters spelling G sign for God sign, the truth, and the letters HW, initials for Henry Wriothesley. In the addendum to the video, I explained that the legendary mother of the House of Anjou is the mermaid Rosy de Vere. This is where the de Vere name comes from. She was also known as the Siren of Alchemy and is being referred to in the italicized words of Sonnets 119 and 114, which I believe is a hint at authorship. Now something I'd missed is that the upper bar should also include the letters I-O. Here, Io is referring to Apollo, the god of the sun. To appeal to Apollo, Io is spoken twice, called the Iopion or lyric. In his videos, Alexander Waugh explains how Apollo is also a reference to Edward de Vere. So why is all this in column 13? The column begins with the letter G. In the rebus message, the G stands for God, God's sign in the shape of a cross. When John Dee created the grid, he probably assumed people would write the column numbers along the top and notice that the letter G sits right below the 13, or 1-3. If they put it together, they'd realize this is a hint at Genesis 1-3. Genesis chapter 1 verse 3 is one of the most famous quotes of all time. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. For Christians, Jesus is the light. He says he is the way, the truth, and the life. And in the Gospel of John he says, "Whoever lives by the truth comes into the light." There are places in the Bible where light and truth are considered synonymous, and I think this rebus is about God, also Apollo, shining light on the truth about H.W., Henry Wriothesley. Here, Io might also be referring to Edward de Vere. It's in column 13, which begins with the letter G, because chapter 1, verse 3 of Genesis is about God and light. The light is Jesus and reveals truth. Rosy de Vere was the mother of the House of Anjou, and the rebus is in the shape of a cross of Anjou, so the truth about Henry Wriothesley is that he's a de Vere. This is my interpretation. Okay, now after I posted the last video, a viewer, John Guarnaccia, I hope I pronounced that correctly, John commented and asked, "Shouldn't the rebuses be in threes?" At first I didn't think so, but I gave it some thought and realized that, yes, if the rebuses are true, then there must be 3 of them. So I set out to find the third, and it didn't take long. I thought, if we're talking about Edward de Vere's son, they would be the 18th Earl of Oxford. So it only made sense to me that the rebus would be in column 18. And there it is, in the shape of another cross of Anjou, with letters spelling Rose Inling. In Shakespeare's day, the British definition of Inling was a newborn lamb. Sometimes we think of a gentle or innocent person, particularly a child, as a lamb, and Rose Inling is referring to a rose child or a newborn rose. In addition to this, I think by using a word that means lamb, Dee might also be telling us something about the child's personality. In 1593, George Peele wrote a poem entitled The Honor of the Garter, and in it he describes Henry Wriothesley as Gentle Wriothesley, Southampton's star. I find that interesting because when we describe a person as being like a lamb, it usually means we're saying they have a gentle nature. So a rose, who's also a young lamb, sounds like it could be describing Wriothesley. I think D gives us another clue telling us who the parents are. Beginning in column 19 are the letters OT. I've explained in other videos how an O represents a rose and the T a cross, and I believe this is indicating a rose cross. Notice how the arm of the ensuing sun rebus reaches out with the word sun ending in column 17, Edward de Vere's Earl number, and it's immediately followed by the rose Ealing rebus in column 18. Lying over the top part of the rebus is a cross. Beginning in column 17, the left and right sides of the arm of the cross spell EO, 17 Earl of Oxford. At the foot of the cross is the letter E for Edward. Altogether, Edward 17 Earl of Oxford. In the middle of the cross are the initials ER for Elizabeth Regina. Queen Elizabeth was a Tudor rose, and the initials for Elizabeth Regina are right where the rose on a Rosy Cross is set. I believe this is a Rosy Cross because it begins in column 17 and ends in 19, where we got the hint for it from the letters OT. The gematria value of 17 is equivalent to the letter R, and 19 is equal to the letter T. RT are initials for Rosy Cross. However, this is not a rebus like the other ones with messages. This is just an extra clue that D is giving us in the shape of a cross. Notice how the two rebuses have the same letters around the top. On either side of the words ensuing sun are the letters EO and ER. I believe these are set up on opposite ends to reflect being the father and mother, and if we include the E in the middle, the initials stand for Edward, Earl of Oxford, and Elizabeth Regina. The rebus is in the shape of Libra scales, Rosaly's birth sign. The rose Ealing rebus also has the same initials, though in the shape of a cross. The first E begins column 17. Reading the 3 points of the cross, we get Edward, 17, Earl of Oxford, and then in the middle, where the rose should be, we get Elizabeth Regina, the Tudor rose. The word Ealing means a young lamb, is used not only to refer to a child, but could also be referring to Rosaly's gentle nature. And the rebus is in the shape of the cross of Anjou, because Edward de Vere was the mother of the house of Anjou. Therefore the rose child is a de Vere. Again, this is my interpretation. Altogether, I believe these messages are telling us that Henry Wriothesley is the son of Edward de Vere, that he's the actual 18th Earl of Oxford, and his mother is Queen Elizabeth. Alexander Waz theorized that Wriothesley was the father of Henry de Vere, which I subscribe to, but I think if the ensuing sun was talking about Henry de Vere, it would be in the shape of Pisces, his astrological sign, instead of Libra, which was Wriothesley's. Combined with the other clues I've gone over, I'm interpreting this to be about Southampton. If you think they're about Henry de Vere or even someone else, please leave a comment. There's another OT on the grid that may also be hinting at a rose cross. Around the OT there's a triple tau, 3 T's that form a small cross shape. I believe Twice 11 Brethren was either another name for or a branch of the Rosy Cross Brotherhood, and I think this OT is here because Twice 11 is equal to 22. One of the things I believe Twice 11 is referring to is a cross, and just below the O or rose there's a cross in column 2, row 2, which hints at Twice 11. Beneath the 3 T's at the base there's a letter M. In Hebrew and Greek, M is equal to 40. 40 is a homophone of 4T, which sounds like fourth T. So the M represents 40, or the fourth T. M being equal to 40 appears in a code in Sonnet 22, Twice 11 again, and I think D's using 4T or fourth T here to make a complete Rosy Cross. There are 2 OTs on either side of the grid which I think indicate Rosy Crosses. They're not rebuses like the other ones, they're more like additional hints or clues to what's already there, and they don't need to be confirmed by Jesus 3 times to be valid. Which brings us to something that, when everything's said and done, is pretty amazing. Waugh explains that the rebuses are confirmed to be true and references to Jesus are found connected to them 3 times. The sonnets don't come with a list of all the different words or ways Jesus can be referred to, and while it uses letters like ISH, in signo hoc, meaning in this sign, it's also an anagram of IHS, Iesus hominum salvator, Jesus Savior of men. The column numbers and some other characters are also used to validate the rebuses. Now when he goes over the Vere's line rebus, he confirms it once by the column number it's in, explained in the video, and 2 more times by the 2 sets of triple tiles along the bottom corner, highlighted in blue. There are 3 T's, and then TH stands for Templum Hierosolima, which forms the triple tile symbol of Royal Arch Freemasonry. I'm pointing this out to show that, to confirm the rebus, the words or characters can go along its edge or across it. For example, Wa shows how the letters ISH run along the bottom and across the S of the South Cross Owl rebus in column 7. Also notice with the Westminster rebus in columns 1 through 4, the ISH and, read the other way, the IHS, touches only one letter along the rebus edge. We can see that the ISH letters extend for the widths of both rebuses. However, with de Vere's line rebus, the 2 sets of triple tiles just wrap around the corner. So as long as the word we're looking for to validate the rebus goes across it, touches the edge, represents Jesus, and is found 3 times, then the rebus is valid and proven to be true. Okay, so we're told that there's a paternity lie in Edward de Vere's line and that he's without male issue, which means he died without a legitimate male heir. There's also a rebus that reads, In Iesum veritas venit, which means, in Jesus the truth comes. I believe these rebuses tell the truth about what that lie in Vere's line is. De Vere's motto was, Vero nihil verius, nothing truer than truth. Since these rebuses are telling the truth about Vere's paternity lie, I think truth is the word we need to look for to validate them. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, so by finding truth, we're finding Jesus. I is the 9th letter and stands for Iesus, and the 9th column begins with his letters, ISH. This is the last column where these can be found. After that, there are no more for the rest of the grid. Again, in Jesus the truth comes, so we're looking for a word that means truth. And Jesus leads us right to it. Reaching down, the ISH touches a rebus that spells ver arete. Alexander had found the word arete and sent it to me, and I noticed along the top are the letters VHP. Arete is a Greek word meaning excellence and sometimes virtue. The reason why D is using a Greek word here is because he's letting us know that VHP are Greek letters. In classical Greek, H was sometimes used for the long vowel E, and the Greek letter R or rho is written the same as the Latin letter P. So VHP translated is VER, and ver means truth. That's the word we're looking for. Before I start, let me point a couple things out real quick. Later down the grid, D also uses the Greek letter rho with the ensuing sun rebus. He spells Henry Henpie. Again, in Greek, R is written exactly like the letter P. When the letter's translated, Henpie becomes Henrie. Also, I figured out Edward de Vere used the classical Greek H or eta to hide his name at the beginning of Venus and Adonis. It opens with an acrostic spelling EVHRH. Translating the letters, the acrostic becomes EVERE, Evere. The Ver Arete cross and the I-shaped En Iesum veritas venit rebuses both appear in column 10. Wa explains the reason why the latter is in this column is because the Roman numeral for 10 is X, and X stands for Christ. If the Ver Arete rebus needs its own reason for being in column 10, it may be because Pythagoreans believe the numbers symbolize perfection and completeness. Combined with truth and excellence, these are qualities that sound like they're defining someone, namely Jesus Christ. Okay, so we're looking for truth, and truth is Vere, which I'm going to pronounce as Vere. Now, to confirm that the rebus is true, we're going to find Vere 3 times. And please bear with me because something really incredible happens. The first Vere starts at the bottom of the grid. EVR is an anagram of VER. In Monos Hieroglyphica, Dee explains that it uses Greek, Hebrew, and Latin, as well as the Kabbalistic methods of Gematria, Notarikon, and Zirif. Zirif, also called Tamura, is the rearrangement of letters to make new words and phrases or anagrams, and Dee is using them in the grid here. Notice how it's spelling upwards from the R in 4T. I'll return to that later. Next we go up one row and it spells VER. That's the second Vere. And the third goes across the word arete, an anagram spelling VRE. So after Jesus blesses the Vere arete cross, we found our 3 examples of Vere, confirming that the rebus is true. Notice how all 3 together form a letter T or cross. Everything's going to stem from here. From Jesus to Vere arete, the 3 rebuses about Henry Wriothesley are going to be confirmed 3 times by Vere or truth, ending in a final code that brings everything together. Okay, the first of 3 rebuses about the ensuing sun begins in column 12, and the first Vere to validate it is here. It was not used on the Vere arete rebus. Again, each of these VERs or anagrams of them are only used 1 time. The second is a diagonal going upwards, an anagram using the Greek H or eta for the letter E. And then the third wraps around the point of the Vere arete cross, which I think also resembles a spear. Again, the letters VHP are Greek for VER. Altogether, they make this pattern. So we have our 3 Veres confirming the rebus is true. Notice how it looks like a line beneath a letter O. The 3 Veres that confirm the Vere arete rebus make a letter T, and the 3 that confirm the ensuing sun rebus make an O over a line. It took a moment, and then I realized what this was. When you look at them together, they make a Rosy Cross. The O represents the rose, and the T the cross. The symbol is based on the Tauro cross, where the loop from the Greek rho character is offset to the right. Some refer to it as a Christian ankh. It's found in the frontispiece inscription of the 1611 King James Bible, where I found 3 examples of 1740, explained in video 41. This is 5 years before the publication of the Rosicrucian Manifesto Fama Fraternitatis. Notice how the Rosy Cross connects to the R in the letters that spell 4T. R is equivalent to 17, so it's a Rose Cross stemming from 1740. What do you think that could mean? Personally, I find it extraordinary that John Dee went through the trouble to draw a Rosy Cross in the middle of the grid and connected it to Oxford. He does the same with the Fiat Lux code I found hidden within the marked sonnet numbers explained in several videos. Using the Kabbalistic methods he mentions in Monos Hieroglyphica, we end up with the 2 names F Rosy T, which stands for Fratris Rosicrucis or Fraternity of the Rosy Cross, and 4 T's, which stands for Oxford. What the relationship was between the 2 we're still trying to figure out, but it must have been important because the name of the brotherhood is found throughout all of the Shakespeare works. Alright, now altogether that gives us 3 rose crosses on the grid. There's the OT beginning in column 2, indicating a rose cross. It's surrounded by a triple tau, and at the base of it is the letter M, which is equal to 40 in Hebrew and Greek. 40 is a homophone of 4T, so there's a 4th T at the base of the triple tau. The OT in column 19 also gives the indication of a rose cross nearby, extending from the O or rose. It's comprised of letters that are initials for Edward 17, Earl of Oxford, and Elizabeth Regina. And in the middle of the grid, stemming from 1740, is a Rosy Cross comprised of veres. Again, these are not separate rebuses with their own sets of messages. They function as additional hints and clues for those messages, and I believe as a kind of signature connecting the Rosy Cross and Edward de Vere. Okay, we're going to continue to validate the rebuses. The Vere arete and ensuing sun have been confirmed by truth 3 times, using 3 different examples of Vere for each, and while doing so, they draw a Rosy Cross in the middle of the grid. Next, we're going to look at the first cross of Anjou. The letters of the rebus spell G sign for God sign and the truth. There are also the letters spelling Io for Apollo, which may also be a reference to Edward de Vere, and HW for Henry Wriothesley. I believe it's telling us that God's light reveals the truth that Henry Wriothesley is a de Vere. Alright, here's the first Vere, which wasn't used to confirm the prior rebus. Again, each Vere is only used once. Connected to it, right in the middle of the word truth, is the second one. It's in yellow so you can see it more clearly. Again, in classical Greek, H was sometimes used for E, and reading upwards, VHR translates to VER. And the third runs right along the bottom edge, an anagram spelling VRE. Three Veres confirming the rebus is true. Notice how they're all still connected. Lastly, the third rebus spelling Rose Inling in the 18th column. The message is, the 18th Earl of Oxford is a young lamb, a child who's a rose, which I think means they're born of a Tudor rose. And they're a de Vere because, again, Melusine de Vere is the mother of the House of Anjou, and the rebus is in the shape of a cross of Anjou. Continuing from the third example of Vere in the God sign rebus, the first Vere is found along the side. Next, it goes up a row using the Greek letter R, which resembles a Latin letter P, an anagram of VER. Then, going diagonally upwards, the third is another anagram of Vere. So we found Vere 3 times, confirming the rebus is true. Now check this out. Excusing all the colors I'm having to use, it's an unbroken line. Jesus, or ISH in column 9, reaches down from the top of the grid to bless the Vere arete cross. Next, from the bottom of the grid, stemming from the R in 1740, a Rosy Cross comprised of Veres is drawn in the middle. The Veres then go across, touching each rebus 3 times each. No example of Vere is used twice. The next Vere ends in column 18, where we find the rebus about the 18th Earl of Oxford, and it touches the OT Rose Cross in column 19. Everything is connected, and I believe this gives us the message, God, Vere, and Rosy Cross. If I'm right, then it may symbolize John Dee's belief in the 3 and 1. God is a Trinity plus his creation. On the cover of the Sonnets, I found 3 examples of God, Vere, and Rosy Cross. So we have 3 on the cover, plus 1 in the dedication. 3 and 1. The messages I found have been verified by truth 3 times each. In combination with the rebuses in Alexander Waugh's videos about a lie in Edward de Vere's line, I believe they're telling us that Henry Wriothesley is the illegitimate son of Oxford and Queen Elizabeth. That said, I'm open to other interpretations. Since I feel certain I've confirmed the rebuses to be authentic, I think it's important the messages are properly understood. I know it won't matter to most because these are codes and people are snobs, but for those who know what they're looking at is real, maybe we can discover for ourselves the truth about this missing part of history. Whether it's Henry de Vere or Henry Wriothesley, I believe the answer is here. I took my best shot at examining everything and sorting it out, so if you want to try, by all means, let me know what you find. There are naysayers who, despite everything that's been shown, refuse to accept that John Dee's genius is on display here, and that no design went into the Sonnets Dedication or the grid. I would challenge them to pick a number, but have a reason why that number. Write out the dedication in a grid according to that number, come up with a reason why everything should be in a certain shape, like a cross, and find messages in that shape that have to do with someone other than Edward de Vere. Choose Francis Bacon, Christopher Marlowe, or even William Shakespeare, and see how many messages you can discover. Keep in mind specific rules have to be followed, and there has to be a theme. Let me know how that goes. Okay, I'm going to switch gears now and go from the sonnets to this. I've shown this 1624 portrait of Henry de Vere and Henry Wriothesley a couple times before, but I recently found something on it that I think tells us something really interesting about Wriothesley. In his video, The Fisher Kings Act 1, Alan Green explains that though the Two Most Noble Henries portrait is based on an earlier one of King Frederick V of Bohemia and Gabriel Bethlen, Prince of Transylvania, they're actually two separate engravings, meaning the plate for the earlier engraving wasn't reused to make the later one of the two Henrys. Everything is so similar that it looks like they simply replaced Frederick and Gabriel from the neck up with Henry de Vere and Wriothesley. But, as Alan Green explains, a brand new plate was made for the two Henrys and all the details were redrawn with subtle differences that he explains in his video. What's interesting about all this is, King Frederick and Prince Gabriel Bethlen were both denied their full kingship. One abdicated after a year and the other was sidelined, as Alan Green explains it. So by having Wriothesley and Henry de Vere appearing in the exact same image as the earlier king and prince, is the two Henrys portrait reflecting their story. In video 20, I explained how the de Vere coat of arms is concealing a message. In the coronet, there appear to be 4 letters, but there are actually more. The first spell OXON, which is an abbreviation for Oxonia, meaning from Oxford. To save time, I'm not going to go into great detail here, but the letters are scored in such a way that, once they're separated, they spell the words Mon Nom and Mox Nox. Mon Nom is French and means my name, and Mox Nox is Latin. To the best I could translate it, Mox means presently, and Nox is night or dark. If we take presently dark a step further, my guess is that the letters on the de Vere coronet are meant to be understood as, my name is now veiled. Again, if you want to see how the letters are separated, please see video 20. Now, if Henry de Vere's coat of arms is telling us that his name is veiled, then that would fit with Alexander Waugh's theory that he was the son of Henry Wriothesley. I'd gone over this before, but it wasn't until recently that I looked at Wriothesley's coat of arms. Alexander provided me with a close-up of it, and immediately I could see the coronet has letters etched into it the same way as de Vere's. The first thing that stood out was that 2 of the jewels, or O's, are scored with the letters IX, which is the Roman numeral for 9. If we add 9 and 9, we get 18. Like the rose Ealing rebus from column 18 in the Sonnets Dedication grid, is this because Henry Wriothesley was Edward de Vere's son, the actual 18th Earl of Oxford? The next thing I saw is, above the first IX or 9, hidden in the coronet's ornamentation is a word. Unfortunately, the resolution of the image will decrease when I upload the video, but take a moment and see if you can tell what it is. I saw the word rey, R-E-Y, which is Spanish for king. The Y seems to curl up, and it looks like there's an accent over the E. Look at the shading. The first O in the coronet is in shadow, as is the point of the coronet following the word rey. If we remove the shadowed area and don't look beyond the shading after the word rey, it's as if these are the areas we're supposed to focus on. Rey IX, meaning King 9. There's also the possibility of a little bit of a line that continues beneath the letter Y. Instead of following the curve around making a Y, is the letter instead an X, spelling R-E-X, which is Latin for king. Is it Ray with an accent over the E, or is it Rex? Personally, I think it's Ray. Either way, the word means king, and it's printed over the number 9. If Henry Wriothesley was the son of Edward de Vere and Queen Elizabeth, he would have been King Henry the Ninth. And he would have also been the 18th Earl of Oxford. Something else is that when the numbers are read right to left, or if we turn the image upside down, the numbers are scored in such a way that they also read X10, X10, or X10, X10. X is 10 in Roman numerals, so X10, X10 adds up to 40, the number we associate with Edward de Vere. 40 sounds like 4T, and 4 T's equal Oxford. Like I said, I think we're looking at the word Ray, which begs the question, why would Wriothesley use the language of the enemy of England to refer to himself as king? England was at war with Spain, and around the time when the portrait was made, Wriothesley was off fighting the Spanish. I don't know if we can know for sure why he would use Spanish, but I have a suggestion. The portrait has royal symbolism on it, and is a treasonous piece of artwork. Wriothesley knew that by having it made he was committing treason, and would be seen as the enemy. So he's using the word king in the language of the enemy. It's a somewhat sardonic take on the situation, a bit cynical, but it also wasn't meant for the public, and could have been a darkly humorous joke between he and Henry de Vere. I don't think we can ever know for sure. However, whether it's Ray or Rex, the word means king, with a 9 underneath it. I also want to point out that between the points of the coronet, from the T and two to the P and par, there are 9 letters, and just outside of that, the letters being pointed to are an R and an A. The letters are equivalent to 17 and 1, totaling 18. These are the same numbers we find drawn in the coronet, the number 9 printed just below the word Ray or Rex, and added together 2 9s equaling 18. I'd also like to add that Alexander Waugh, who provided the image for me, believes that Wriothesley's coronet, just like Henry de Vere's, also spells the word Oxon, meaning from Oxford, and suggested that by fathering the 18th Earl of Oxford, Henry Wriothesley has effectively usurped the crown, or Earl's coronet, of the Veres. He believes this makes better sense than the word for Spanish king being used to convey that Wriothesley was royalty. I also believe this portrait is hinting at Wriothesley being the father of Henry de Vere, but with the royalty symbolism like the globus cruciger front and center, the backstory of the king and the prince the portrait is based on, and the word king with the number 9, I think it's telling us that both of these men were of royal blood. If all this has some other meaning, then okay. To learn more about the portrait, I invite you to watch the videos by both Alan Green and Alexander Waugh. Different interpretations, equally as interesting. The last thing I'll say about the portrait is, within months after it was finished, Wriothesley was dead of an unspecified fever, and around half a year later, fever also took Henry de Vere. Okay, I'm going to start to wind things down. We're looking at 2 portraits of Wriothesley sent to me by a fellow researcher named Jack. The portrait is by Daniel Myton sometime after 1620. I couldn't find out exactly when the second version was painted, but I did see it was purchased in 1858, long before there was any Prince Tudor theory. Jack noticed in the second portrait Wriothesley's left hand is hidden, possibly suggesting a sign of Freemasonry, and that there's something going on with the silver coronet-shaped bracer. Jack found that the bracer has been scored 9 times just below the crown or coronet. This is different than in the other portrait. Was the artist suggesting Wriothesley was Henry the Ninth? As far as what I've seen, in total there are 12 messages in the Sonnets Dedication grid. I've explained many times I believe 12 is a cipher for 4T. There are also 12 letters in the name Edward de Vere and 12 lines in the dedication. The messages appear to reflect the concept of 3 in 1. 3 messages about Edward de Vere and 1 about Jesus or truth. In addition to the 12 rebuses, there's another layer of hints and clues, but these are simple shapes and I don't think they're meant to be added to the messages. They're either to verify or help understand them. I don't know if I'm missing any here, these are just the ones I could think of. Regarding the concept of 3 in 1, Alexander Waugh found that 3 of the rebuses tell us where Edward de Vere is buried, with Christi eleison, Christ have mercy, as the benediction over the grave. He also shows 3 messages about a lie in Edward de Vere's line, and 1 message about Jesus, and Iesum veritas venit, meaning, in Jesus the truth comes. I believe we're being told that, through Jesus, we will discover the truth about Vere's line. And that's what happens here. Beginning with the Vere Arete cross, each rebus is confirmed by truth. Henry Wriothesley 4T is the ensuing sun. Taylor Rose refers to the Tudor royal garment. Melusine de Vere is the mother of the House of Anjou, and next, in the shape of a cross of Anjou, God's light reveals the truth that Henry Wriothesley is a de Vere. It's in column 13, beginning with the letter G, because it's referring to Genesis 1:3. Ensuing sun goes through the God sign rebus, ending in column 17. Then, in column 18, we're told that the 18th Earl of Oxford is a rose eanling. This rose lamb is Henry Wriothesley. He's the illegitimate son of Edward de Vere and Queen Elizabeth, which is why de Vere is referred to in column 17 as having no male issue. I know Wriothesley being the father of Henry de Vere would have been a big scandal, and maybe enough of one for Dee to go through all this trouble. Now Wriothesley being the son of the Queen, that would certainly warrant it. Some clues I think Dee provides us with are the initials for Edward, Earl of Oxford, and Elizabeth Regina. The Libra scales are Wriothesley's birth sign, and the cross of Anjou implies he's a de Vere. And rose eanling is used to describe his gentle nature and to tell us he's a Tudor rose. Dee also constructs the grid so there's a rose cross made of Veres rising up from 1740. It's an offset OT, similar to the one that'll appear in the King James Bible frontispiece a couple years later. I have to admit this caught me off guard when I saw it, and it was a pretty cool moment. The fact that it's stemming from 1740, the number of Edward de Vere's name, is obviously telling us something. What that is exactly we're still working on, but I found Rosy Cross codes in all the Shakespeare works, and that does include the 1611 King James Bible. One more thing about this Rosy Cross. In the middle of the rose, or O, there's a letter A. I think this AO might stand for Alpha and Omega, and it's possibly a message about Edward de Vere, or 1740, birth, death, and resurrection. I believe all the messages in the Sonnets Dedication grid have now been found. Like I mentioned earlier, I believe the answer to who Henry Wriothesley was to Edward de Vere can be discovered here. I did my best to interpret everything, but my opinions aren't set in stone. If you have a different interpretation for what these are telling us, or for why the word Ray or Rex is engraved above the number 9 in Wriothesley's coronet, please share it in the comments. Thank you to Alexander Waugh for sending me a close-up of the Wriothesley coat of arms from the Two Henrys portrait, to Chris Johnson, Patrick Jennings, Ron Raffel, and Jack, and to you for watching.